Well, the response also distorts the history of at least some of the natural sciences. Scientist Charles Darwin himself to Harvard paleontologist Stephen Jay Gould have clearly seen that theological ideas can have scientifically testable implications. So if you want falsification as one of your means, then having the ability to falsify it makes it a science, right? Again, that from last episode, having the ability to falsify it makes it a science. Even if it turns out to not to be negative, or it turns out to be negative, then it's still scientific if it has these scientifically testable implications. So, for example, Darwin plainly stated in the introduction to his first edition on the origin of species that one of his chief goals was to argue that special creation is erroneous.
Right, it's false. Well, he's attempting to falsify special creation. So it has if falsification is a part of the criteria that makes something scientific, then clearly if special creation can be falsified, if it's erroneous, then it's a scientific, kind of proposition, right? So you can't throw it out. That's the idea he's making. He says further, many contemporary scientists, both theistic evolutionists and others, rely on claims about God's nature and ways in which their scientific case for evolution can be made. So what are we talking about here? Well, he says, for example, they may argue that if God had been the designer, then various organisms and their parts, think the panda's thumb, right? Thank you, Stephen Jay Gould.
Right.
Would have been much better and more efficiently designed than they are. And thus, God as designer is falsified by these cases, and the cases confirm evolutionary theory. So notice what's going on here. They're using a theological argument to show that God didn't do it, right? So the panda's thumb wouldn't align with an intelligent creator, how the intelligent creator would make the thumb, and then therefore probably the thumb wasn't made by the intelligent creator, and in fact, perhaps even the intelligent creator doesn't exist. Well, you've used a theological argument to make your case.
Right. Yeah. This is Dawkins and the giraffe's neck, the vessels in the giraffe's neck. Well, if I was God, I would have done this differently. Okay, well, thank you for allowing us to come into the area of science. Whoa. We don't want you here. We just want to, falsify your claim. Oh, okay. Well, hold on now. I think we're like vampires. If you invite us in, you've let us through the door and you can't kick us out. So
that's right.
We're here to stay, unfortunately. So
we're for blood now.
Yeah. We've only got about 6,000 years advancement on you. So, try and catch up. We'll figure out a giraffe's neck when it needs to happen as well. Well, the point here is not to evaluate the strengths of the arguments or to examine the appropriateness of the model of God as designer that they utilize. Rather, the point is to show that the history of biology and paleontology include arguments of this sort time and again. And such arguments are not merely rhetorical devices, but substantive claims that show how theological ideas, adequate or inadequate, can have implications for scientific explanations, evaluating and testing. Again, if you allow for intelligences of any variety into these ones, again, why not one more? And so, you can have this as an idea. And again, show me God. Well, okay, show me the caveman who painted these paintings. Well, we know that someone was here to paint these paintings. Okay, well, as soon as you show me, I just believe in one less caveman painter than you do, right? So we can just do this. Well, it's things that we make. Okay, well, the things we make are informational. Well, DNA is informational. So therefore, there has to be an intelligence behind it. Well, this is the one exception that intelligence is communicated or information is communicated without intelligence. Okay, so that's special pleading. So again, the idea is once you're having that conversation, you're having a scientific one as far as origin or source. And so you have the ability to allow intelligent design into these cases. Well, cases of alleged bad or inefficient design are used by scientists to argue that these cases falsify the notion of a God. Because if such a God existed, surely we could have done a better job in our own ideas, and so God could have done a better job, and he did a bad job and ineffective in this case. Well, if a theological model of God can be used to falsify that model, why can't a different theological model be used to provide scientific evidence for that model of God? I always think of the argument that I've seen when I was a kid of, if God was real, our eyes would be designed more like the octopus, who had blood vessels kind of behind the retina areas. And, we have, because our blood vessels are in front, we have this blind spot. Okay, but an octopus lives in the water and therefore doesn't need to protect its eyes like we do, who are outside of the water where the UV light can get to it more readily. So actually those blood vessels protect our eyes and our eyesight way better. And so we have a trade-off there of a design. So, okay, now we're just in the explanation for why it happened, not for the who or the what it happened. And we've moved into science of explaining the how. So, okay, so intelligent design then can become part of the scientific community. There, we're there.
There you go. All right. So he's given us then an argument in the previous section that we had earlier. The negative side of methodological naturalism, it doesn't make its case, right? There is no demarcation for something that's scientific and non-scientific. And then he's given us this other argument, kind of the positive case against methodological naturalism in terms of it's really inconsistent, right? So those are the two arguments against methodological naturalism.